Let's check in on Canada's Conservative Party, shall we? Because after the election, one word was all the rage when it came to Poilievre's Conservatives: pivot. And at first, it seemed like the Conservatives might have planned to take a crack at a new tone. At least some of them started going on CBC and actually talking to journalists like a tiny bit. But yeah, it turns out this new tone sounds a lot like the old tone. In fact, it might even be going even further right. And I've got the fundraising emails and tweets to show you why, so let's dive in. First off, Pierre Poilievre and several of his MPs just came out swinging in support of the Freedom Convoy organizers, which is a choice, particularly considering his tough-on-crime messaging during the election, and, as commentator Jennifer L. pointed out, his party's vocal and vehement opposition to political interference in judicial matters, as they made extremely clear during the SNC-Lavalin scandal. But Poilievre and several of his MPs came out in support of the convoy organizers in the face of what one MP called the, quote, excessive and vindictive sentence the Crown is seeking. Poilievre asked, "How is this justice?" while also taking the opportunity to attack what I have to assume is pro-Palestine protesters who are opposing a genocide. Very cool. Now, I do want to avoid being completely uncritical here, because what prompted those tweets was the convoy organizer Tamara Lich posting on Twitter that the Crown is seeking a sentence of 7 years for her and 8 years for her co-convoy organizer Chris Barber. I reached out to Paul Champ, the lawyer who represented downtown Ottawa residents in a class action lawsuit against the convoy. So he's definitely not pro-convoy. And he referred me to a post of his because he was traveling and didn't have a ton of service, so he couldn't really get me like a full response. And in his post, he said there is no question that the convoy was serious. And he pointed out that the organizers have spent the past, quote, 3 years showing the opposite of remorse for what they did to the people of Ottawa. But he said an 8-year sentence is ridiculous. In his opinion, no custody for Lich, 6 months for Barber. So there could be a premise here that's worth interrogating, but the messenger is wrong, because it is broadly considered very problematic for politicians to weigh in on matters that are before the courts, which is something lawyer Michael Spratt said to the Canadian press. He called the MPs choosing to weigh in on this court case, quote, craven politics. And yeah, I know Poilievre isn't an MP, but he's still the leader of the Conservative Party, and others who weighed in are elected officials. Spratt also said that it is, quote, very dangerous for politicians to be weighing in on matters before the court. So for politicians to speak out, period, on a matter before the courts is a choice. But to speak out on a matter before the courts in favor of the convoy organizers is a revealing choice that shows you just how little the party is pivoting, unless you count going further right a pivot. But if you look at recent fundraising emails from the Conservatives, none of this is a huge surprise. I've been debating making a video on this for a while now because these emails are not good. What I find so interesting about fundraising emails specifically is they show you how parties speak directly to their most devoted supporters. The people who are passionate enough about the party that they signed up for emails and who the party wants to get money from. So the way any party chooses to speak to those people can be very illuminating for understanding how that party sees their base. Like when they were doing some light election denial in their fundraising emails about election recounts, implying the Liberals in the media were trying to, quote, tip the scales when it comes to recounts. Which is impossible because they are being overseen by a judge, scrutineers, and the ballots being counted were already cast. So there's nothing a political party can do to sway the result beyond making sure that all the ballots are correctly counted. And that's only tipping the scales in favor of the truth. Anyway, here are some of the other fundraising emails the party has been firing out recently. There's been a lot about how dangerous it is outside. Like, according to the Conservatives, crime is, quote, out of control. And the Liberals have, quote, unleashed a crushing wave of violent crime in our communities, a, quote, all-out rampage of crime. That sounds scary. Except Statistics Canada says the crime severity index dropped 4% last year. And while most of that is because of non-violent crime dropping, violent crime did drop down too. So after 3 years of this index going up, things are actually improving. But if you get Conservative fundraising emails, you're kind of left with the impression that anytime you step outside, you're volunteering for the purge. Then we've got their attacks on the media, specifically the CBC. What else is new? Using one person's resignation from the public broadcaster as confirmation of what, quote, most Canadian patriots already knew, which is apparently that CBC is state-owned, taxpayer-funded groupthink, and pledging that Poilievre is the only leader who will defund the CBC, which Conservative like Carney is kind of coming for your bag there, Pierre. Okay, so we've got fear-mongering about crime and attacks on the media. Not really a pivot and standard conservative fare. But these next emails I'm going to show you are where the conservatives really show they have no intention of softening any rhetoric. Because this is where the emails get racist. First, there's the aggressive support of Sir John A. Macdonald, an architect of residential schools. The email sent 10 days ago has the subject line, "No Macdonald, no Canada." It warns that the, quote, woke cancel culture machine is in full swing. And that, quote, the Liberals have tried to make Canadians ashamed of our past. And that's the part that really gets me. Because here's my question for the Conservatives. When you say that, which part of the past are you saying we shouldn't be ashamed of? Just wondering, because the criticisms of Sir John A. Macdonald are because of his role in the cultural genocide of Indigenous people in Canada. Are you saying that's something we shouldn't be ashamed of? Or am I misunderstanding you? Yeah, that's what I thought. And just a week before they fired out that email, the Conservatives fundraised off an email with the subject line, quote, "Deport the terror agents." Whoa. The email warns the reader that, quote, terrorists have been allowed into our country, and it details that the Liberals have, quote, let Tehran-linked Iranian terror agents into Canada. For the record, this appears to be linked to a CBC story, you know, the same CBC Pierre is promising to defund, that proves one former high-profile Iranian official has been in Canada since April. But the Conservative fundraising email doesn't provide you with those details because facts get in the way of racist fear-mongering. Because while it is fair to ask questions about how this one official was allowed to get into Canada, vaguely claiming that, quote, dangerous foreign terror threats, quote, harass and threaten our people, and that this, quote, puts every Canadian at risk, that sounds like a great way to fuel racist panics. Like, Jesus Christ, listen to this. Quote, only common sense Conservatives will put Canada first and protect our people from foreign threats by deporting dangerous terror agents and tightening our border. But we need your help to make sure Pierre Poilievre wins his by-election so he can challenge Mark Carney in the House of Commons head on. Please rush in a donation urgently. Then they hit you with that big red donate now button. So my overall takeaway from all of this and everything that I just detailed over the last 8 minutes is that that more moderate pivot that all those pundits were speculating about for the Conservative Party post-election, yeah, that's not a thing. What do you think of all this?